Remember, I have brought him to life because I genuinely want to know how I should move forward in life so that I wouldn't have many regrets. He is my source. Since I have brought him to life, him and I now have a relationship. He is invested as I am. Okay? I give him a chance to speak his wisdom and I soak everything in. But all of a sudden, I am young. My desire is not as intense. I don't yet have an intimate, bona fide relationship with my curiosity about old age. So something about me closes up. The moment he sees this obstacle, like water, you know what he does? He tries to find a way around the obstacle. And that's the trick of the water. You don't fight obstacles. You don't give them energy. You don't pour fuel on flame. He goes around it. He says, would you like some tea? And as he gets up to get some tea, he begins to limp. And then he says a few things, sarcastically, but filled with wisdom, about old age and limping. All of a sudden, he doesn't embarrass me. He doesn't mean, Amir, you're stupid, you forgot, what are you doing? He speaks to me indirectly by limping. And all of a sudden, I am brought back. And now I remember why I went to him in the first place. Okay? Trying to think of the poem. I don't know if it's forgetfulness or Alzheimer's. Ah. Okay. Once if you can make sense of this nonsense on the board, if you can do all of this rightly, you get to a place called Wu Wei Wu. It really is the place of anyone who is really, really good at what they do. Alexis works sometimes in designing backyards, front yards. What do you call it? Landscaping. And because she's really, 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 really good at what she does, it doesn't matter where you take her. She looks at the place and something about her just opens up. She looks at this land, she looks at this space, and all of a sudden she turns into magic. She says, we need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Wu, Wei, Wu. You no longer need to think. You no longer need to do anything. Inspiration lives inside you and comes to you when it finds you worthy. That's the only life you'll begin to know. Okay? And you will only have friends who enjoy this stuff. You'll only have conversations that revolve around this stuff. You'll only read books that deal with this stuff. Your world begins to shrink. You'll have a very, very small circle of friends. But there is a universe inside that small circle. Rumi wrote for about 20 years every single day. The last 5 years of his life, he didn't write a single word, a single line. There was nothing inside him that needed saying anymore. Maybe he was completely at rest, or like God, he wanted to be invisible, or maybe everything just got dried up and he was waiting to die. Do you have any questions or comments before we continue?
I was thinking about some words by Rumi in translation. Let's see if I
Give me the Persian and then the English.
I don't know.
Give me the English and then I'll give you the Persian.
Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. I'm skipping something. I don't care if you've broken your vow 1,000 times. Ours is not a caravan of despair. I'm kind of scrambling things a bit.
That's good. Yeah.
I love that passage.
You know, I don't know what inspired Rumi to write that. Because there are certain biological facts, physical facts that are missing in that poem. It is true that you can go to Rumi at any time, but you need to be interested in what he wants to talk about. Rumi is no different than Moses, than Muhammad, than Lao Tzu. There comes a point where he just grows tired of being around people. You know, if on the other hand you're talking about the poem in this way, that he's not really referring this poem to himself, that there is this place inside you. You can call it God, doesn't really matter. And it doesn't matter how many awful things you have done. Like St. Augustine, you know, if you can find yourself in the proper space, that God within or inspiration within will receive you openly, graciously. That is true. You know, the story of prodigal son is very much the same. You know, the son commits a good amount of mistakes, hurts the father, but the father receives him. But in order for the father to receive the son really, really well, the son must have remembered first. The father must remember, must acknowledge his mistakes, must feel helpless. You know, if that makes any sense. Okay. All right. Alexis, anything? You sure? Beginning? Diana, Shirley, Jane. Brian, you're tired, huh? Yeah. My brother just got back from Europe. When I talked to him, he was half asleep. He put the car on self-drive. My mom called saying that he crashed. So, okay. I realized yesterday that we only have this and next week, and we still have 3 other traditions or 4 other traditions to go. So with your permission, I'm going to end Taoism at this stage and move on to Confucianism and finish that up quickly. Would that be okay? Greg, do you have any questions? You sure? Oh, so the poem is this. چون دایره ما ز پوست پوشان توییم در دایره حلقه به گوشان توییم گر بنوازی ز جان خروشان توییم ور ننوازی هم از خموشان توییم.
Is this what I recited in English?
No, that was what I recited in English. This is the Persian. You know about the daf, the skin, the chains around this drum. If you slap it, if you don't. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give you my version of Confucianism. I gave you Lao Tzu's version of Taoism. So this is going to be my version of Confucianism. And I think of all the traditions we've talked so far, I find Confucianism to be most appealing, especially to Westerners, especially to Americans, because it's very practical. Alexis, maybe you want to change seats? Yeah. If you ask a Hindu, someone who's really proficient, a practitioner of Hinduism, what could I do to become happy, satisfied, content? He would probably tell me that there is nothing wrong with having desires, but most often people have the wrong desires that would lead to pain and misery and suffering. If you really, really, really want to be happy, sit in a cave somewhere, find a teacher, cleanse your emotions, cleanse your thoughts, become empty. So Atman, your soul, can somehow blossom. You can experience it. Then you will find a self that is beyond the physical. If you ask a Buddhist, how can I be happy? The Buddhist will tell you, there is nothing wrong with having pleasures. But most often, the pleasures that you and I pursue lead to disappointment and then sorrow. If you really, really want to be happy, first, there is no self. You don't have to look for anything within you. What you need to do is the following. Any desire that is born within you, pay attention to what sits next to that desire. It's a tomb. It's a coffin. Pursue the desire. There is nothing wrong. Know full well the pleasures that you will get from this desire will come to an end. With every birth, there is a death. And as long as you can be okay with the death of a pleasure, you want to spend $20,000 on your wedding? Fine. As long as you know full well that in a couple of years you will look back and you say, how could I be so stupid? Enjoy every pleasure that comes to you with an equal amount of pain. It's like a grandparent or someone who's really, really reflective when they have a child, and when the child is born, not only do they enjoy the birth of their son or daughter, at the same time that they're laughing and they're very inspired and excited and in awe, they're also crying because they know that their son will die. They may not see it, but their child will die. Their child will be disappointed, will have regrets. It's not very difficult. And as long as you can be mindful of that, you'll be fine. And what will protect you in Buddhism is your mindfulness, because you won't pursue very many things out there. If you were to ask Gilgamesh how you can be happy, he'll tell you. You want money, you want sex, you want power. You also want love. You will experience your love dying. You'll be stranded. You'll be a forest dweller. There, you will no longer care for what people think, how they judge you, what they say about you. You will go on a long quest. You will understand the meaning of life. And then you will realize that the best thing you can do is go to Target, buy a lot of journals, keep your own company, and just write how things are within you. That's the only way you will be happy. Be self-sufficient. If you were to ask a Taoist how you could be happy, they will tell you, find a Socrates who is a force bigger than the world. He will strip you of everything that you know. He will make you empty, force you into the desert of isolation, in despair. Hopefully there, a child within will be born. All these traditions have one thing in common. Leave society. There is something magnificent within you. That's not Confucianism. You want to be happy in society, but it has to be the right kind of society. Do you think I can have a sheet? If it doesn't ruin your book? Thank you. This is a demonstration I have shown to my classes for over 30 years. My suggestion to those of you who are in this class is do not be interested in the esoteric or the spiritual traditions. They're no good for you. Do not be interested in the Epic of Gilgamesh, or Hinduism, or Buddhism, or Taoism, or Islam, or Sufism, I should say, or the Kabbalah in Judaism, or Gnosticism in Christianity. Focus only on Confucianism. Why? Divorce rate is about 60%. Poverty line is about 58, almost 60%. Addiction is on the rise. Suicide is on the rise. Everything that's bad that gets in the way of having a relatively healthy environment within as well as without. America basically lacks. If I may go back for one moment and talk about Aristotle, even though we've talked about him before, American culture turns all of us into beasts. We are lonely. You're sad and in despair. You're confused. Capitalism has destroyed anything that's good within us. Go back to what I said earlier, that the only way that most of us in this class can experience a modicum amount of joy in life is by smoking or drinking or having sex. We don't have parents. We don't have strong communities with meaning. The culture doesn't have roots that go deep down. The narratives in this culture are quite shallow. That makes, for the most part, our lives shallow. So when an unpleasant event happens to us, as sole individuals living in a culture of almost 500 million people, when something happens, we break. So this is what happens to us in this culture. Remember, we have no real communities. When an event happens that's unpleasant, we break. And then we break again. And then we break again. This is culture. When something tragic happens, it no longer rips. You no longer break. Because you have the support of your culture. And the psychology of your culture. And the support of your tradition. And the support of your community. If you have no money, your parents will give it to you. If you're stranded, your parents will provide for you. If you're sad and lonely, there are places, familiar faces you can go to. No one throws you into a nursing home. Everybody cares. There is cultural shame. And if you break in a community. Confucianism is very, very, very simple. Relationships, human relationships, your relationship with people out there. Most importantly, your parents, your siblings, and then strangers out there. But if you have had a relatively traumatic upbringing, there's a good chance that trauma will impact the way you are with your siblings, the way you are in your relationships with strangers. You will stand no chance of survival. Okay? So I'm going to make Confucianism very, very practical. And I'll try to put the ideas within the context of this culture and the people who live in this culture. First, marriage. Do not be an idiot. Is that clear enough? I remember many, many years ago, I had about $30,000 in my savings account. As I was walking, I saw this beautiful car. It had a for sale sign on it. I had no reason not to trust the owner of the car. I had faith in human decency. I trusted. I loved the car. And I asked him, how much will you sell this to me? He says, 40,000. I said, I'll give you 30,000. Okay. I bought the car for 30,000. He gave me the keys. I sat in it, put the key in the ignition, turned it. The engine didn't turn over. I tried a few times, nothing. I lifted the hood and I realized there is no engine. How do people get married these days? You allow your senses to direct you. You look at someone, they speak well, they look well, they have some degrees like me, they dress well, and that's enough to create a mirage that I'm mature enough, qualified enough, most importantly, mature enough to handle the complexities of relationships, especially marriage. And it's not very difficult to inspire someone who is lonely and miserable and in despair. Give anyone who hasn't eaten food for a while poison and tell him or her that it's delicious. They will eat it. They will die. Create a culture where people are walking around in isolation. They're hungry for attention. They're hungry for human contact, human touch. Go back to Edward Munch. The man is screaming. No one cares for him. What is he looking for? Just someone to listen to him, someone to hear him, someone to pay attention to him. And when that someone does, what happens? A week later, they fall in love. 2 weeks later, they propose. 3 weeks later, they're married, doing their honeymoon in Hawaii. 6 weeks later, they have a child. 10 weeks later, divorce. Who's going to take care of the child? If you are interested in someone and you feel that you are in the right place in life, inwardly as well as outwardly, that you want to get married, your thinking is not sufficient. If you have parents who are decent, if you have grandparents who are decent, if you have friends who are decent, take your companion to your grandparents. Let me tell you what your grandparents have that you don't have. Your grandparents, or if you have decent parents, and have been married for about 20, 30, 40 years, they know that marriage is a bumpy road. Sometimes hurricanes, sometimes tsunamis, sometimes tornadoes. They have learned to survive, to compromise. They also know the importance of money. They also know the importance of being stable, physically, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually. Forget the spiritual. It doesn't mean anything. And if I may, let me just focus on women just for a minute. America does not produce men that are mature. If you're lucky, maybe when they're 50. Okay? When you take your companion to your parents, and this is, I guess these days doesn't really matter. What the parents will do is what I didn't do. I should have taken that car on a test drive. I should have taken it to a mechanic. I remember some years ago I took my companion, someone I knew, to my parents' house. My mom didn't talk to her at all. It was a busy night. When the gathering was over, she comes to me and she says, Amir? I said, yes, Mom. She's not ready. So what do you mean? She's not ready. Mom, she's ready. She's not ready. Well, you didn't even talk to her. I don't need to talk to her. She is not ready. I went against the wishes of my mother. 3 years later, I realized she wasn't ready. But 3 years of waste. Now, again, also keep in mind that it's a male-dominated culture. So some of the things that we may talk about tonight may feel unpleasant to the ears of women, maybe even men. Marriage is about a man and a woman. And I suppose these days it doesn't really matter. It could be a man to a man, woman to a woman. But you need to have the maturity to survive a relationship because it is tricky. And you need to have come from a culture that makes divorce nearly impossible. So you could survive the hurricane, because that is what life is. You think this class is boring? Wait till you get married. You will look at your companion and feel as if you have nothing to say, and indeed, you have nothing to say. You need to survive it with respect and dignity and maturity. Now, it doesn't mean that you should survive an abusive relationship. I don't mean that. There are do's and don'ts in every culture, in every relationship. Okay? And there are certain lines that can never, ever, ever be crossed. Let me give you an example. Imagine that you have a companion, and sometimes when you're in a good mood and you're having fun, you look at your companion and say, "Ah, you idiot!" And both of you giggle. You giggle. Times are good, but here's what you need to know. When you look at your companion in good times and you say, "Idiot," he laughs. But the problem with life is, it's not always going to be positive. But if that becomes a comfortable statement for you to make to your companion, you idiot, you idiot, you idiot, when times become tough, and when you're agitated, and you're angry, and you look at your companion in agitation, frustration, confusion, anger, and you say to him, you idiot, he's not going to giggle.